The ANC's National Disciplinary Committee of Appeal has upheld a decision to expel former President Jacob Zuma from the party. Zuma was kicked out of the ANC in July after he was found guilty of violating Section 25 of the party's constitution by supporting another organisation while still a member of the ANC. Zuma broke ranks and formed the Umkhonto weSizwe party in December, saying he no longer identified with the ANC under the leadership of Cyril Ramaphosa. The Jacob Zuma Foundation says the former president will consult both political structures and his legal advisors.
And the consultation that he'll be doing basically will be in two parts. He will consult the legal team. He'll also consult the political space. At a political level, the first place he's going to consult, obviously, it's his branch in Nkandla to get them to understand what is the status quo. He'll also consult his region. He'll consult his province. And then in that process of political consultation, a view will be taken whether this must go to the highest decision-making structure of the ANC. As we know that all these structures that will be taking all these kinds of decisions, including the NEC, are all sort of interim kind of decisions, so to speak. The final decision maker on anything in the ANC is the conference. Basically, all these decisions were actually taken unilateral. The side of His Excellency President Zuma has not been aired. And as you say now, as you mentioned these things, you don't have answers. Nobody has answers because President Zuma hasn't been given a proper right of reply. So all of those matters will be dealt with at the appropriate forums. All I can say to you is that it's not over yet.
Joining me now are political analyst Professor Sethulego Matebesi and governance analyst Professor Zwelinzima Ndevu. My esteemed professors, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Professor Ndevu, let me certainly get your impression on that statement. You've just been listening to that piece that we watched, and it's argued that Jacob Zuma's side has not been heard. What side is there to hear, and will it in any way change the decision by the ANC?
Good afternoon to you, Hugo, and good afternoon to my colleague and your listeners. I think this exercise from President Zuma is really an academic exercise. It's an exercise that doesn't seem that there are any prospects of winning from President Zuma. Because one, President Zuma informing a party, he has clearly indicated that the party that he has joined voluntarily many years ago no longer reflect his values, no longer reflect his beliefs, and therefore he has a right to then leave that party. And the ANC allows members to have dual membership within structures that are in alliance with the ANC. And any structure that is outside of the alliance, more especially a structure that would then contest elections against the ANC, that is a dismissible offense. It is, Mr. Zuma is not the first person to be dismissed. We'd remember in the conception of COPE, there were many public representatives, more especially councillors, that were dismissed on that same principle as well. So I do think that he is prolonging the unnecessary. If the ANC is no longer reflective of his views, then he must move on. He should not drag himself, his party, and the ANC in all this mud.
Professor Matebesi, the MK party, led by Zuma, obviously, has already contributed to the ANC's electoral decline. How might this expulsion further affect the ANC's voter base?
Yeah, good afternoon, and good afternoon to your viewers and my colleague as well. This, for me, it's yet once again one political matter that, as my colleague have indicated, is just academic, but one should actually ask questions. Should Jacob Zuma, the former president of the ANC of this country, get his way? Well, the question is, how chaotic will not only our politics become, the political landscape, because this also wants to reshape what I will call even, disciplinary procedures and all that. It will be a chaotic situation out there where today you are a member of Party X, but yet you can canvass for Party B while voting for Party C. That is something that cannot be condoned. And yet again, you've got formal structures who are actually endorsing this. This, for me, it's actually very dangerous. And it also tells us to what extent South Africans are willing to support an individual that they believe in, despite the consequences and the implications that this has for the country. And many youngsters that are still looking up to leaders like President Jacob Zuma. For me, it's really difficult to understand what is the former president trying to achieve with, the type of route that he's taking with this particular member.
Professor Ndevu, maybe you might have some insights into that which is baffling Professor Matebesi. And as far as what is it that former President Jacob Zuma is trying to achieve? Because for the ordinary person, it almost makes very little sense to want to cling on to the ANC when in the very same stride, you've gone and formed a political party that's largely been successful and contributed to the demise of the ANC in those May 29 elections.
I want to agree with my colleagues. It's really confusing, and it's creating a presidency that have not been seen before. But what is clearly President Zuma's intentions, in my view, is to not only leave the ANC intact, but to leave the ANC divided, to leave the ANC confused, to also attract sympathy from those members that might think that President Zuma has been treated unfairly. This is not the first time that President Zuma has done this. As and when a decision doesn't go against him, he goes out in the streets or literally out of the structures of the organization and canvass for his position outside of those structures and hope to win them inside. So I think his intentions, in my view, it's really to delay the renewal within the ANC, to ensure that there are those that will be ill-advised and sympathize with him when the writing is on the wall, that he has moved on. He should accept that he has moved on. As you indicated earlier on, he is actually doing well with his political party, which has become the third largest political party in the country. Therefore, I think he must focus his energy on that and leave the ANC alone at this stage.
Professor Matebesi, let's talk a little bit about governance, right? And I raise this issue because there seems to be wanton reaction or dealing with issues that relate to governance, whether it's individuals within the ANC that are choosing not to go before, choosing not to abide by the ANC's step aside rules. Does all of this play into a political party that does not have sound governance structures, or certainly structures that results in its members adhering to the rules of the party?
Yes, you're actually very correct, and I like your question. But I mean, this is an organization more than a century old, which by now I think issues such as disciplinary matter should be actually standard procedures. But this particular matter has also been prolonged, and I think that's perhaps why the former president feels that he is entitled to take the kind of route and that he have taken with this particular matter. But also very surprising in terms of issues of governance, which has been highlighted by the Jacob Zuma Foundation chairperson during this press release, is that the former president will consult his branch, and that in itself gives us a glimpse of how some leaders are actually underestimating the very same bread and butter matters of political parties, and which are the branches, your rank and file members. Because does that now mean that if there are members of the African National Congress who are sympathetic to and still have a liking for Jacob Zuma, and if they raise their voice, then the president now has a legal standing? I don't think so. You don't need to be a legal guru to know that this particular matter does not hold. I mean, at any level, you can't have dual membership. And now they want to bring in the rank and file members of the African National Congress. And we know for a fact that there are still many members within the African National Congress who are still, likely to support the former president. But even if a branch makes pronouncements, I do not believe that that would hold, because how can you have a situation where one single member have dual memberships outside of an organization, and especially in this particular case of the former President Jacob Zuma?
Professor Ndevu, just how much hold does Jacob Zuma or influence have on the ANC members, particularly those in grassroots levels, now that the appeal has been declined, and assuming it stays in place? Is his expulsion likely to impact the ANC in any way?
I think one must appreciate the fact that political dynamics since after the dawn of democracy, or since the unbanning of political party, have changed drastically. Previously, one would have said that each member of a political party, especially with the ANC, with its rich history, members were very loyal to the ANC itself, and decisions that are taken by the high structure of the movement were respected, even if people disagree with them, even if they have a fundamental different view, but they would respect them. An example would be the suspension of the armed struggles. Many influential leaders were unhappy with that, but they towed the line of the decision of the higher structure within the ANC. Currently, those dynamics have changed. It would seem that in political parties, more especially the ANC, members are members of members rather than the party. And in that sense, when decisions that are taken that affect those members that they are members of, and they are aggrieved, they tend to then lean on sympathizing with them and verbalizing that sympathy within the structure, which sometimes borders on ill discipline. And I would not be surprised if that happens with Mr. Zuma's situation currently. We would know that clearly many of the ANC members in KwaZulu-Natal, for example, did not vote for the ANC. Card-carrying members, some of them. Some, I suspect, might have pretended to campaign for it, but because they are sympathetic to an individual. And that's the culture that is entrenched in political parties, and more especially in the ANC. And that could be that spark that ignite that fire in terms of his support and people sympathetic to him. Ideally, this you don't want to see in politics, because politics are about ideology. Politics are about ideas that people buy in. You are associated with the political party, not because of individuals that are there, but because of the ideas. But we have seen over time that being eroded, that culture, and it is a culture of individualism. And I would not be surprised if there are many people who come to come up supporting him and not on a principled position.
Professor Matebesi, let's focus a little bit now on the MK party and look at Jacob Zuma's attitude towards the ANC. He's been perceived to be a rebel-rouser of sorts, causing conflict and a disregard for party laws or party rules. Do we expect his own membership to adhere to rules? Is he able to enforce discipline if in the ANC he's perceived to be ill-disciplined, courtesy of some of the issues that have happened? Can he manage his own political party? Is it the reason that there is so much disunity within the MK party, as we understand?
No, it's going to be very difficult, because, and that's why we said we should ask ourselves, what precedent will this set? For even MK members, you now have a leader who still is fighting actually for his dear life and membership of an completely different political party. And the question is, what is going to happen if any of these other members of MK starts to do and act in the same way, this leader that they glorify? But what is happening here, perhaps another question is, and to a certain extent, my colleague have answered that, has provided reasons why are this taking place. You've got and it's not only a public figure which has been reshaping the legal and the political landscape. And the question is, why is this happening? It is happening because the environment is conducive. If Mr. Zuma have known that there will be a completely onslaught, a pushback, and this will not be tolerated within the African National Congress. But he knows the internal dynamics of the ANC, and that's why perhaps he's pushing. And where does this, because you need to have the financial resources to be able to also advance all these legal battles, and he's capable of doing that. So the environment is conducive, but the question that well, based on your question, it's to say, but what precedent is the setting? Because if one member of the MK also now comes out in public and say, but I also want to be a member of another political party, I don't think MK party will condone that. And this has a lot to do with governance issues, procedures and all that. But at the end of the day, there's also the message that our leaders are conveying to say that sometimes, your own personal interest can be advanced to such an extent that it actually, now completely conflicts public interest and even his own political party, which is the MK party.
Professor Ndevu, as we draw to a close, how can political parties in South Africa rebuild public trust amid these high-profile disciplinary actions and internal conflicts?
This is a very fundamental question, I think, that you're asking, because politics have tended to be individualized, have failed to center around those that lead political parties, and therefore trust has diminished in the political parties. We need to see political parties representing a voice of the voiceless, representing the voice of the majority in society. And we can only see that through the views of an ordinary man on the street in Soweto or in Mlazi or in Langa Township, his or her views being able to be heard through a public representative of a political party. And if that does not happen, if what we hear, if what politicians are bickering about in all political parties have nothing to do with the man on the street, then you would not restore trust. But if these issues are issues that deals with what affects the man on the street on the day-to-day basis, the high unemployment, the economy that is not growing as it should, the issues of energy, the water shortage, and so forth and so forth. If politicians are preoccupied that would build trust in the public. If politicians do fight corruption, the siege of corruption that is eating the fiber of our society, if we see politicians not talking about fighting corruption, but doing something to fight this corruption, seeing people going on prison, even prominent people going to prison, that would bring some trust in the system. But if that does not happen, people will continue to distrust political parties. And what we have seen in the last elections might even be a worse situation in the upcoming elections at local government level and the next national and provincial elections. So we need politicians that are up straight, that are ethical, that lead political parties that embed these values of ethics, of good governance, of ensuring that there's accountability. And in that, we build the trust that we need.
Professor Sethulego Matebesi and governance analyst, Professor Zwelinzima Ndevu, appreciate your time contributing to that conversation on confirmation of Jacob Zuma's expulsion from the ANC.